Bonjour, bon matin, hi, good morning, everyone. We're about to get started. Welcome to Healing Beyond Harm, Approaches to Harm Reduction and Cultural Safety. So I've already said bonjour, hi, which most folks are familiar with, especially since we're in Montreal. I also want to greet you by saying sego, which is a ʔnangiarvik greeting. So to start, I want to acknowledge that we're on the land called Tio'tia in the ʔnangiarvik language and Muniang in Anishinaabe, colonially known as Montreal. The island has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst many First Nations, including the ʔnangiarvik of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Huron-Wendat, Abenaki, and Anishinaabe. And that being said, I'd like to welcome Matthew for the first presentation.
So hello. A lot of familiar faces, so thank you for coming and supporting us. Most of you know some of the house, so I assume it's for moral support that you are here. But there are some new faces, so welcome. A bit about myself. So my name is Matthew. I'm a settler here in Montreal. I've been here for several years now. I've been a member of PAC for the last 6 years, working in different roles on the front line, later on in coordination and management. A bit about what I want to talk to you guys about today is a program that we've just started. It's rather new. I'll tell you a bit about the history of PAC for you guys who don't know about us. More recent, I won't go too far back. Some of the obstacles that we've been meeting in terms of meeting the needs of the people we serve. And then I'll get into the interesting details about the project that we're working on currently, and sort of how we've maneuvered ourselves to address those issues. And then I'll invite Chris later on to share us a bit of his story. He's one of our residents and outreach worker and artist and does many things in the community. So he has a lot to say as well. Also, like I mentioned before, this is a newer project for us, so we are still learning. This house has been up and running for 1.5 years now. So by no means do we have all of it down pat. If you guys have suggestions or ideas, feel free to ask them during the question section or come find me afterwards. I know there's many of you who have similar projects that I'd love to hear about and inspire about. So PAC, we've existed for 25 years now. It's been a wonderful 25 years. In the last 5 years, we've really developed quite a bit. We've grown a lot of our services. We went from one single shelter to now 2 shelters and several housing programs, outreach work, navigators. And in the last 5 years, there's been a huge focus on harm reduction approaches, harm reduction programs, the managed alcohol program, which Rosio and Esme will be talking about later on. So I won't go into detail about that. We have the PAC 2, which is our low barrier shelter. And then we have our permanent housing program, which is not a dry site. And all these programs have developed in a really short period of time. A lot of them came about during the pandemic. We realized that during that time, there was a lot of people that we just weren't serving. Indigenous homelessness in Montreal is a growing problem. It continues to grow. It really started during that time. For me personally, when it really hit me that there's a whole bunch of people that we weren't serving was during the pandemic, when there was services closing one day, open the next, closing the next day. Services were adapting, protocols and health guidelines were constantly changing. I was part of, at the end of the day, we do some outreach around the PAC site, around the neighborhood, to try to just keep our community members up to date on what was going on and what was happening. And with curfew, there wasn't a lot of people around besides our community. And for me, just doing those roundabouts and realizing that there's a whole bunch of people out here on the streets that I didn't know, that I hadn't seen around PAC before, and just how many people that just weren't accessing services that they needed. So because of that, we developed these services that are really harm reduction. We wanted to make sure that we put in place services that were flexible enough to welcome these people into our sites. So once we got people into our sites, of course, you have to start working with them. Given a little bit of stability and time and comfort, the people that we're now servicing could start to think about what's the next step for them, where are they going from there. And as an organization, we didn't want to just pass them off to someone else. We wanted to be there to walk alongside them, to develop services that are often considered wraparound services, but for us, it's really about walking with them on their healing journey. So we develop programs such as our health navigators. Some of you are here today, which have really been essential to getting those people into services, getting the healthcare they need. We developed transitional housing, which has been a long time coming. We had a NAVET transportation service that we developed just to make sure that people are connecting to these services, getting around the city, especially people who are newer to the city, coming from the north, and there are 2 streets in their community coming to Montreal where there's a metro bus and many streets can be daunting and confusing. And there's a whole bunch of amazing organizations already working in Montreal, so making sure that they're connecting to those is really important to us. We have our Safe Start program, which is really working with new people coming into the city. And again, all of this is to make sure that we're connecting people, that we're able to accompany people to their next steps. Like I said, it's not just enough to meet them where they're at, but we have to be able to move with them. And these are the programs that we sort of developed to do so. Coming back to our health navigators, the program the house that I'm going to present later on, our sober living house, Annagiarvik, really came out of the feedback that we're getting from the navigators, from our caseworkers. We were doing community consultation on all of our sites to sort of know what the needs are in the community. And what we're often hearing is that our health navigators were doing an amazing job. They developed an art about getting people into treatment centers. There's lots of barriers, there's lots of obstacles and pitfalls in that process. And our navigators really did their best to fill those gaps. But in the end, there was all these struggles and obstacles that they faced. So like I said, some of the obstacles, very, very briefly, there are many. Different people have different issues, different lived experiences. This is by no means a summary of all of them. But what we're hearing back from the community is just, it's hard to think about sobriety. It's hard to think about the next steps when they're in environments in which the normalization of alcohol use, problematic alcohol use especially, is so normalized. Like I said, we created these shelters and these harm reduction sites that I stand by, that I love, and I think that are so essential to serving people. But for some people who are questioning about becoming sober, people who are still in the contemplation phase about what should I do next, when you wake up every morning and everybody around you is already drinking, that they're already in the shakes and it's a normal part of your everyday life, it's hard for you to start thinking about, what could be for me afterwards. So just being in those environments sometimes was limiting what the community members could imagine for themselves. The gaps between the services was a big thing, that the navigator's role really helped with that. But in terms of getting people from the shelter, so working with them, their motivation, their reasons for getting sober, getting them to the hospital for the medical detox. It's not always easy. People don't have numbers. The beds at the hospitals can fill up fast. And when someone says they want to go rehab, it's really, you have to strike when the iron is hot. Like, that's when their motivation is. That's when we need to get them there. Hospital beds don't always wait for the same timeline. But the navigators worked a lot on that. And then there's the post-medical detox, getting people from the hospital to the longer-term treatment centers, which often work in cycles, cohorts. So if you're finished your medical detox and the next cycle of treatment center isn't going to be for another 2 or 3 weeks, where do you go from there? You've left the shelter, so you lost your bed. If you would want to go back anyways, like I said, those environments can be really hard to maintain your sobriety. So we were saying like there's these little holes. Like a lot of the hospitals do a lot of work to try to make sure it's door to door to door. So you finish your detox, you go straight to the therapy center. But that's not always possible. Then there's emotional challenges. Like I said, the motivation to want to get sober. And even if you do all those steps, you didn't fall through any of the cracks. You've made it from the shelter to the medical detox to the long-term therapy. What's for you after that? For a lot of people, it was coming back to the shelter. And for a lot of people, it was living that, even if they've made all that progress, all that work, it was sort of felt as like a step back, a failure to some sorts, that, why would I have done all this work? And, treatment centers are amazing. They do work with you on a lot of stuff, but you don't leave the treatment center necessarily with a degree, a house lined up, a job lined up. There's only so much they can do in that period of time. So a lot of people were coming back to the shelter and just sort of being discouraged and loss of hope when they said, like, I've worked so hard on this, and here I am back at square one. And then there's just feeling overwhelmed. Like I said, you've gone through all this process. You've done so much work, but then you realize that there's so much work left to be done. So in terms of sobriety, you may have done a lot of work, but then you realize that, I still have life skills to develop. If I want to live on my own, I still have to learn how to do a budget. I have to do my taxes. I have to do all these other things, that it can feel overwhelming. So there's really that need of supportive environment that was stopping people from taking the first step sometimes. So the solution we came up with was Maison Annagiarvik. I'm careful with that name. It is very close to the word for bathroom in Inuktitut. It does mean safe space, which I suppose bathrooms are safe spaces. But our goal with this project was really to provide, it's a long, I won't read all the text, but subsidized housing, so low-cost housing that's culturally appropriate, that people that are in our community could see themselves in this house, see themselves in the services that are being provided. It was a sober environment, which was most important. Like I said, the shelter system and some of the street community in Montreal has normalized some of that the alcohol use. So we really wanted to create a place that was sober for them to be safe and to work on the rest of the goals that they had set them for themselves. And it was independent living. So they did have some autonomy in where the next steps were going to be. It sort of came about, we took these three models, or the three frameworks, to sort of create this program. So like I mentioned before, we have other transitional housing. A lot of the stuff we work on with people there are life skills, of course, so learning to budget, learning to cook, learning to manage guests in your home, how to take care of a home, which are challenging things to do. But it's often things that are on a checklist. Often things I've done my taxes, I've gone to the food bank, I've registered for this. They're often things that are there's a start and a finish. Whereas when we're talking about more of the addictions models, it's something that's never completely done. It's a journey. When you're trying to become sober, it is a lifelong commitment, and there's never an arrival point. So that is an aspect that we do try to take into account when we provide our services. So there are things that are checked off the list, good job done, there's some gratification in that. But there's also the support through this longer journey that is addictions. And then, of course, the Indigenous culture and the community, that's a huge aspect of all of our housing programs, and hopefully our shelter services as well, in terms of a community. It's people that have gone through similar things to you, who can be there to support you, and that's a central part of it. And in terms of just the culture and the role that it plays in the healing journey, it's not just beadwork as arts and crafts. It's something that's healing. It's something that's reconnecting. It's something that is purposeful in how it's done. So we've tried to merge all these things together to provide the programming at the house. So like, this is a bit of repetition. So we work with elders. We make sure that it's a cultural safe environment. We try to have workshops within the house, either from AACA, the Red Road to Recovery. We do, like I mentioned before, there's a focus on life skills, but there's also a focus on sobriety. It's a regular conversation about reshoot, about falling off the wagon, how do we pick ourselves up again. Cultural connectedness, there's a resilience, framing that, really recognizing the journey that these residents have gone through and are continue going through. It's really encouraging. So circling back to some of the obstacles that I had mentioned earlier before in terms of, the emotional challenge, the loss of hope, like I mentioned, sometimes coming back to Montreal after doing a rehab is so demoralizing. With this program, it's giving them something new to come back to. They're still sort of keeping that forward momentum. It's not something that is, full circle. They are improving, and it's something new to look forward to. There's hope there. And also just filling the gap. So often the house is a stop measure gap. So if you've left the shelter, you've gone to the medical detox. If your session of treatment center hasn't started or is going to start in a couple weeks, you can still come to the house. You can still settle into the house. You can settle into the sober community and prepare yourself for the next steps in the treatment center. And then when you go to the treatment center, of course, you can come back knowing that there's something waiting for you. So the environmental social pressures, like I said, the street community and some of our other services that are really harm reduction focused are really hard environments to stay sober in. So with this house, we really tried to create a community that's sober, you're still part of the PAC community, you're still part of this Montreal urban Indigenous community, but you're a small subsection of it. So when we do have ceremonies, when we do have larger gatherings, you're still invited. The people of the house are still part of that community. They have family, they have friends that they've grown up with and spent so much time with. We don't want to cut those ties. We want to be sure that we're there to nurture them and help them support them. But at the same time, we want to help these residents sort of develop new ties with a different subsection of the community. And also just to make sure, I've talked to some other residents and their visitors and their friends, and the community, the rest of the community at PAC, so the ones who are still living in our harm reduction services and PAC 2 and whatnot, sometimes for them, they also need support, and they see their friends go through all this hard work that they're doing. I was talking to someone who I had mentioned to them just in passing. I saw them at one of their shelters. I'm like, oh, you don't come by the house anymore. I haven't seen you in a while. You used to visit one of our residents quite often. It'd be great to see you again. And they had mentioned oh, that person doesn't need me anymore. And there was a bit of anger. There was a bit of a sadness saying this person, this resident of the house and I, we've been through so much, and my way of supporting them involved alcohol. It involved, we'd pitch in together to get a six-pack and we would talk away our troubles. We would be there to support each other, and she doesn't need that anymore. And it was just this feeling of, oh, I don't know how to support them. But the support I could give them is not what they need now, and the things that she's going through now here at the house, being sober, I don't have the skill set to support them. So for me, this house and this project and the services, the fact that they're still part of the other PAC programs is a way to sort of heal those connections, to make sure that those ties aren't lost, that those people who are still in the harm reduction shelters do recognize the residents as something to look forward to. If she can do it, so can I. And just learn to support each other in different ways. So there is a role for this subculture of sober community to have a positive influence on the rest of the community that's not yet there. And like I said, being overwhelmed with all the other stuff. So dealing with sobriety is one thing, but learning to do your taxes and learning to cook and clean and learning to negotiate relationship with the other residents of who does their dishes and who does their chores. Those are all skills that the staff are there to support them on, and they're not just sort of left on their own after the treatment center ends. So like I said, it's a learning process. It's only been a year and a half that the house is up and running. It is a new step for us in terms of the services that we provide. Some of the lessons that we've learned is it takes a while. When we were thinking of this project and we were starting it up, and even when we were doing sort of the promotions around our other partner organizations, we're visiting them, we're saying, like, this is what we have coming up. And all the organizations and all the workers say, oh, like, we have just the person to refer to you. You guys are going to fill that house. There's only 14 spaces. You guys are going to fill the house so fast. Like, there'll be a wait list forever. And then we opened up and nobody came. And it was long before people started to trust the process and to understand. No one wanted to be the first person to go through it. But we did have some courageous people, and it is up and running. It is full now. So it's wonderful. But it was a nail-biting experience for a while, saying, like, is this really something that's going to work? Did we misjudge the needs of the community if no one's coming? But we had to give it time. We had to continue working with our partners. We developed some great partnership with other organizations in the city through this process, so it's been great. We also sort of underestimated the level of institutionalization that a lot of our community members lived. It is something that we noticed in our other programs as well, like in our transition housing, of course. We realized that people have been through all these series of institutions and sort of adapted to those institutions, and breaking them out of that has been a challenge. I think at the house it's been even more so because it has been like a compacting of institutions that they go through. So a lot of our residents have gone through youth protection services. They have gone through the prison services. They've gone through the treatment centers. They've gone through the shelter services. And all these can be amazing institutions, but there are institutions where things are decided for you. There are rules that are created by the organization. There's rules that are enforced by the organization. And there's very little room for the people to develop their own sense of place and authority over their space. So when they come to the transition program, we say, like, so-and-so is not doing their dishes, and they complain to staff about it, we're like, well, go talk to so-and-so. Like, it's no longer our role to be enforcing the rule. This is your house. You guys decide how it's going to run to a certain extent. And it's you guys who are enforcing the rules. And it takes a lot of support and encouragement for them to break that habit of always being, oh, like when something goes wrong, I talk to PAC, and PAC's going to handle it, or I talk to the prison guard, and the prison guard makes sure that the rules are enforced. So that's one thing that we're really struggling with the house, is like, how do we break this institutionalization that these people have been in for so long? And then community. There's no way I could stress enough the importance and the role of community in this house. Like I said, a lot of the residents have been through such similar experiences. And using that as sort of a means to help each other out, to support each other, not necessarily emotionally, but like just in terms of what resources are available. One person really enjoyed this treatment center, while another person said, oh, I went there, maybe it will work for you as well. So I can't put enough emphasis about the role that the community can play in healing of itself. A lot of times I remind intervention staff, your role here is to step back. Your role here is to facilitate the connection between the community and let the community start to learn and start to heal itself, which can be challenging for some of our intervention staff who are in the mindset of always wanting to do something, always wanting to help. But sometimes the best thing we do is sort of step back and see how the community heals itself. So that's been my experience in terms of coordination side and management side. I'll invite Chris up to say a few words about his journey and where he's been. So thank you for your time.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm a resident at the Annagiarvik house. I've been there since, I believe, the 1st of June, so that's been like 4 months now. And it's been a really great 4 months because I'm 2 years sober. I recovered a couple of years back. Thanks everybody. And I was, like hesitating, like where to live because, like he says, you're downtown right away. You're coming out of a shelter. You're right in the middle of the fire. Like, there's no saying to your friends, "Oh, I'm going to go hang out at a library today." It just doesn't sound that cool on the streets. So, it takes a lot for you to like stand up and go, "Okay, I'm going to do something else today." I spent a lot of time biking around Montreal, visiting a lot of shops and stuff. So, anyways, my sobriety story started 2 years ago. I got into the pack because I was staying there like, what was it, 2011 during the Occupy Montreal. When the tent city was up at Square Victoria, there was a lot of like natives hanging out down there, and I just lost my apartment and my job, so I hit the street, and it was like during the Occupy, so it kind of coincided for a good place to live at the pack, right? Because everybody was native, like, "Oh, don't stay in the tent, come on to the pack, and you could stay there as long as you want." And so when you're on a street position, something like that sounds really attractive because other shelters, you have 3 days and you have to be back out onto the street for a couple to give room to other people. Other places, they won't let you in like sober, or you don't feel comfortable because you're native, this and that, you don't speak French. So the pack was like really welcoming to native like me in the city. And I just really felt comfortable at that place at that time, being around natives in Montreal. But I always felt like you could do better, like, and with everybody in the whole place at the pack. So just like the downtown area was so toxic back then. Now it's got a little bit better because of the places we could go to. The Friendship Center has helped a lot in the daytime to like accommodate people when they want to get out of the streets for the day. What else have we got here? At the house, it's really fine to be there. I didn't know it was full, like because there's a couple guys that wanted to get in there. Yeah, I get up in the morning. I'm right at the mountain, so I go out. I got time to chill out, read a book, a couple chapters of my book, have my coffee, plan my day. And instead of going towards downtown, the open door, the downtown core, I go the opposite way, do my own thing. And it makes a difference in the day, like how you plan it. You just can't be around a toxic environment. And I feel like when people see me in my recovery, I don't want to be pushing it onto people, like, "Oh, look at me, I did this, you could do it too." I just want people to see what I'm doing and be like, "Yeah, man, he's doing well in life. I'm gonna go see how he's doing it and ask a few questions," which has happened a lot. You get a 6'9", 300-pound Mohawk guy coming to you saying, "I wish I was tough as you." That means a lot to me, like seriously. Keeping busy, I do an art hive in the community. It's every Tuesday night. Well, it's going to be starting up in February, but things like this, community initiatives, will help people give a sense of a more belonging than being on the street, right? So when we have an art hive, we have like 50 people that are on the street in the community that would be normally panhandling in the street, being a nuisance. They're coming down and creating art, being part of the community, having a meal, laughing, being happy, and at the end, they're leaving going, "Wow, I feel like I did something with my day today. I didn't be a nuisance. I was actually, a positive member of society, and I like that." I do outreach work too with ISWP, Indigenous Street Work Project. We go out and hand out harm reduction gear, make sure everybody's safe in the street because, there's a lot of overdoses due to the fentanyl crisis. It's really hard because I lost a lot of friends over the last couple of years, like way too many. So that's one of my main missions is to make sure that when I'm out in the street, people are safe. They know that there's no naloxone out there, that they know how to use it. And now they're not waiting for us to give it to them. They're coming to us saying, "Hey, give us naloxone, give us Narcan," So that's making a big difference. I find that's a huge improvement in our community. What else? I hold the AA at the Annagiarvik house as well on Fridays. It's going well. There's also the Cocaine Anonymous hall going there. I really like the whole house because it gives a sense of belonging in a community still. There's a few little ups and downs. Like you said, we're all a bunch of guys that are in recovery, so we're having a little bit of, attitude problems. But it's really cool, like calm. There's a sobriety there. That's the main point, I don't think anything else is going on. Just being out in the community is, well, I don't know how to say this. It's really fun because, I'm still there from where I was back in '92. I should have started back then. I was a runaway here back in '92 on the street. I was a Pops kid, and I grew up really fast back then. So I kind of stayed connected to the street my whole life as a bike messenger and everything. So when I hit the street, I was kind of ready for what was going to be on the streets, seeing it. And now that I'm off it, I just want to be, a positive member to see people see like, hey, Chris, I want to be like you. And, hopefully they will. So that's about it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Now, please welcome Rosario Mota-Ocho, Esmeralda Adeoud, et Justine Brown. Merci.
I think we have some technical issues with the translation. Should we take a... It's fine now? Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. How are we feeling today? Thank you for being here. There's many great conferences happening at the same time, and I'm really grateful that you guys chose to be with us. My name is Esme Adeoud. I am a social work student, a caseworker, and an assistant researcher. I am of European descent, born to a French father and an Afrikaans mother. This is my colleague, Justine Brown, also an assistant researcher and a social work student. She is of Quebecois settler descent. And this is Professor... Excuse me. She's hiding. This is Professor Rocio Mota-Ochoa. She is Peruvian, born to an Indigenous father and a white mother. That is about our positionality. We are from the Research Laboratory for Indigenous Peoples and the Decolonization of Knowledge in Intervention at the University of Montreal School of Social Work. And today we're going to share with you our project on the cultural adaptation of the first managed alcohol program in Montreal. So we'd like to reiterate the territorial acknowledgement that was done before and acknowledge that this study, as well as as well as this conference is being held on unceded Annagiarvik land. And Tio'tia, Montreal is historically known as the gathering place for many First Nations. We'd like to reiterate our respect for the past, the present, and the future connections and the relationships that we have. So in this presentation today, we're going to give a bit of context about Indigenous people in Canada. We're going to describe what a managed alcohol program actually is, for those who don't know, as well as some of the documented benefits of these programs. We're then going to go on and talk about our research project, the goal of the study, the approach and methods that were used, and then Rocio and Justine are going to speak about the results, some barriers and facilitators to cultural adaptation, as well as leaving you with some final reflections. Excuse me. All right, so this is in no way a complete portrait of Indigenous realities. We're just highlighting a few facts to give us some context to the relevance of cultural adaptation in health and social services. So legally, Indigenous people are divided in 3 groups in Canada: First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Within each of these categories are different groups of a vast cultural diversity. Canada has a settler, colonial, and genocidal history, and the lives of Indigenous people have been tightly governed by a legislative system that is deeply intertwined with land and resource disposition. So, for example, First Nations were displaced and confined to reserves, and amongst other things, were forbidden by law to possess or consume alcohol until 1985. The Inuit were subjected to later colonization, which took full force in the 1950s, where they were forced to assimilative policies such as sedentarization, the killing of sled dogs, and other things that pushed to force them into a sedentary way of life. Today, Indigenous people occupy urban areas, composing approximately 61% of the Indigenous population. We see that even in urban areas, they're not exempt of patterns of exclusion, systemic inequalities, and racism. As you can see, although they compose only 2.6% of urban populations, they make up for, depending on the city, 13 to 68% of people facing homelessness, which are really ridiculous numbers. So Indigenous people experiencing homelessness are also disproportionately affected by health-related risks, alcohol-related health risks, such as mortality, accidental death, physical and mental illnesses, suicide, amongst others. So to conceptualize, I'd like to share a theory that came from the field. I'd like to dedicate this presentation to our late friend, we're going to call today Sam. Sam was a participant from the study in the early phases who was very outspoken, very political. He's an Inuk man from Nunavik, and he wrote letters to ministers. He dreamt of teaching François Legault Inuktitut. He was very vocal about his culture and what he felt that his people needed. I had very much hoped that when we started this project, there would be a space like this where we can invite people with lived experiences and he could come and share for you himself. Unfortunately, he passed away 1 year ago yesterday. I would like to honor him by sharing this theory because I found it very profound. I found it a great way to conceptualize northern colonization. So he would explain to me how his people are currently found themselves in the inertia of colonization. And he would motion like this. He would say, inertia, the movement. And it kind of struck me, and I took notes of this. I tried to draw pictures, and it was only not so long ago that I realized that he was using Newton's theory of objects in motion stay in motion to explain the ongoing effects of intergenerational and colonial trauma on the Inuit traditional way of life. So let's take, for example, the killing of the sled dogs, the Chimit. Recently, I think last year, the government of Canada issued an apology for the massacre of over 20,000 stray dogs between the 1950 and 1975. So although this operation stopped a while back and Canada apologized, that action was not enough to stop the consequences that were unleashed from the killing of the sled dogs. Many Inuits still face challenges regarding food security, nutrition, which is mainly caused to disrupted hunting and eating practices. So the mere end and apology is just not enough to stop that ball rolling. So according to Sam, he explained that if the government in Canada and Quebec were really serious about reconciliation, they would work more actively towards reparation so that the Inuit may thrive to the same degree as the rest of Canadians. And so this is where cultural adaptation and safety in health and social services come into play. Health determinants, trauma, and addictions need to be contextualized as the aftermath of a not so far away past so that we can actively make safer and more accessible services for people like Sam. So, to talk about the services, what is a managed alcohol program? So this is an intervention that aims to limit the harms of alcohol use and homelessness. what it looks like is supportive housing, so it starts with a home. And within the housing, there is wraparound in-house health and social supports, as well as the provision of regular doses of alcoholic beverages. So this means that a person will be prescribed by the team. When a person arrives to the map of Montreal, for example, this person will be assessed by the medical team as well as the workers, and they will have an alcohol plan. So it's basically prescribed alcohol, an amount of doses per day in order to stabilize their drinking patterns. So this is an example here. It'll be different depending on the person and their needs, but a standard prescription that we'll see is one alcohol serving, so in this case, a can of beer, 6%, per hour for a maximum of 18 servings a day. This is going to be adapted, so in some cases, there was one participant who started with 1 beer per hour. It was too much, and then she changed to 1 for every 2 hours, and this stabilized her. In other cases, people have very strong withdrawal symptoms, so upon their awakening, there'll be a lot of shakes and other symptoms, and they will get 2 beers to start their morning in the first hour. So it's really tailored and played with as the person adapts and stabilizes their behaviors. Is this clear for everyone? Great. Perfect. Maps work. The documentation, the research has shown that maps across Canada and other places in the world have great benefits to the people that use them. It's to understand that we're talking about people who have had long-term alcohol dependency, that sobriety is maybe not on the horizon for them at the moment, or is one of the main factors that is keeping them from being housed, and therefore is not the first thing that needs to be addressed. So some of the benefits are ranging from replacing non-beverage alcohol use, so being able to have a beer rather than hand sanitizer. And then we're going all the way to reduced contact with the police and emergency services, increased housing retention, being housed for longer, more stability, increased quality of life, and enhanced feelings of safety and community belonging. And then for Indigenous people especially, it is found that these programs align with Indigenous values of healing, fostering respect, spiritual well-being, and connection. As the person's drinking patterns stabilize, they regain a sense of identity, can reconnect with their family and their culture. And by having these resources, we can also increase their access to Indigenous forms of healing. So, although maps have demonstrated these positive outcomes, there are very few studies looking into how they can be culturally adapted for Indigenous peoples. So our study aims to address this gap in research, especially here in Quebec, where there is only one managed alcohol program. And we're doing this through an ethnographic study examining the cultural adaptation. And this is we're interested in this, of course, map in particular, as it is implemented by PAC, an Indigenous-led organization, with the support of the great team at the addictions unit at the University of Montreal's Hospital Center, or as we know, the SHUM. So for our research approaches and methods, we are using basically this is the presentation that is based on the first 10 months of the research conducted at the MAP. The methods that we have used are participant observation and informal interviews, as well as some semi-structured interviews. Also, we have had, this was facilitated, especially since many of the people on the research team had previous trust-based relationships with the participants. This means that there was ongoing studies from before. Some people from the team had already worked at PAC and so have known the people for a number of time. And this really facilitated being able to come and have this exchange and do this research with the participants. We're using a community-based participatory approach, which really aims for social transformation. One of the main ways that we realized this was through our advisory committee. So this was a bigger committee than most, I'm told, as we tried to really include anyone who was interested. We had residents of the program, some former residents, we had intervention workers, administrative staff, we had Indigenous people that were working at other organizations, and Indigenous people that were living in other housing programs. So we really, throughout this group of people meeting periodically, got a good sense of which directions to go. We were advised through Indigenous research principles of ownership, control, access, and possession, meaning that this became everybody's project. We consulted the participants about the questionnaire, about which way to go about things, sometimes how to present and how to say things. We gave them a lot of liberty in choosing how to go about the research activities, bringing them material that they can use, and really making our research time fun for them and beneficial for them. So these methods have led us to some results, and I'm going to let Rocio present them to you now.
Thank you so much, Esme. I'm very happy to see the room so full and to see many familiar faces among the audience. Thank you so much for being here. So, you're taller than me. So we will share some of our results on how the map model has been adapted to indigenous realities, in this specific case, the map of Montreal. So we have focused these presentations in the facilitators and the barriers to the cultural adaptation to the map of the map model. Okay, so I will start with the facilitators. And one of the big facilitators reported by several of the participants are the cultural activities that are provided by PAC. So in nearby facilities to the map house, PAC provide handicraft, workshops, music, and ceremonies. So many map participants go to these activities or they practice these activities on their own at the house, as reported in the following interview excerpt. So another important facilitator is the presence of a Mohawk elder that comes sometimes once a week, sometimes twice a week, and gives support, emotional support, spiritual support, psychological support to the MAP residents. He has also organized healing circles, and the residents have been invited to participate in these circles. So another facilitator is the environment. The map house sits in a 4-story building in the ground floor, and this building has been decorated according to the seasons of the north, where most of indigenous communities are located. And also, several residents have created art, and they have put all the artwork in the walls. There are also maps where residents can show other persons where their communities are located, and pictures of former and current residents also. So this is the building where the map house is located. It's in the ground floor. And it's like a house. So every resident has a room, but they share common environments. They share the kitchen, they share bathroom, they share living room, the TV also. There are sometimes some issues around the TV, but they still share it. And this helps to foster a home environment. And I mean, they establish relationships between each other. They learn to negotiate things. They have to keep the environment clean also. And they have a lot of tasks and obligations related to the communal life. No? So this way, they start to interact among each other, but also there is a transitory housing program in the same building. And many of the persons that participate in this other program come to the MAP house, and some are family members of the residents of the MAP or friends. So there is like a neighborhood inside the house, so they are considered neighbors. And I mean, they also establish this sense of community and belonging. No? Another important factor for this sense of community are the positive relationships between residents and intervention workers and staff in general. No? So they reported that several intervention workers are willing to listen, they want to learn about their culture. So for example, this is a citation of a resident we call David, and he is talking about an intervention worker that also is sitting here in the front line, that it's a person who was listening to him and giving him support. So this is something they really appreciate. All of them have reported that this is a facilitator, a great facilitator for cultural adaptation. So, and finally, another important facilitator is that PAC give trainings to the intervention workers. So for example, this is a picture of a blanket exercise, but they also give a training on cultural security. So this really helped to prepare the intervention workers for the realities they are going to face while working with indigenous people in a urban environment. So Justine is going to continue with the results.
So I'm going to present the most important barriers to cultural adaptation. The first one is the limited human resources and high staff turnover. So, for example, as pointed out as one of our participants, there's only one staff per shift, and they have a lot of responsibilities and things to do, so it can be harder for them to have the time and the energy to do cultural adaptation. And as pointed out by one of the residents, there is a high staff turnover, and many come and few stays, as cited here. Another barrier is the difficulty of adapting to cultural diversity. So as we mentioned at the start, there's a lot of different indigenous cultures in Montreal and in Canada in general, but Montreal is a place where many different cultures are brought together, and the service is for all these different cultures, so it can be difficult to determine which cultures are being recognized. For example, First Nation residents often noted that most of the cultural adaptation that is done in the program, they felt that it was more towards Inuit residents, for example, with the occasional provision of country food that was eating raw, which is more of an Inuit custom. And also for their part, Inuit residents mentioned that they would like to have an Inuit elder to provide support, as the one that is coming now is Mohawk, so they would like to have an Inuit elder to provide support that they can understand their culture and speak their language. As well, we have observed some moments of tensions between Inuit residents and First Nation residents because of different cultural customs or practice. For example, with the country food that is eating raw by Inuit, some First Nations residents may have expressed concerns around safety or not understood, and that can create some tensions. Also, some First Nation residents felt that Montreal is more part of their traditional territories, and that Inuit residents are more of newcomers to Montreal, and that can create tension as well. Another barrier is the difficulty to access to country food and traditional food, such as caribou, seal, goose, beluga, because of the cost and the availability. It can be hard to come by, and it can be expensive to ship to the city. And several residents expressed disgust towards the food that is accessible or affordable to them, which they call white people food, and say that it's not necessarily a source of sustenance. And one of the residents said that PAC should hire a personal hunter to respond to that need. Another barrier is the urban environment. For many residents, their culture, their practices, or their way of life is really connected and tied to the territory and to their land, and it's elements that cannot be recreated in the city. During one of our advisory committee, one of our Inuk participants said to us that if we wanted to learn about them, then we should go to the north and see how they live. And this was a reminder of how, these cultural elements cannot be recreated because they're linked with the climatic and environmental context. And this was a reminder that they constantly have to adapt to the urban environment, even in services that are designed for Indigenous people. The last barrier is the limited access to cultural activities. So as we said earlier, there is some possibilities of cultural activities that are put on by the organization, but they are limited to the residents of the MAP because they're off-site. The resident needs to go, and most of them have mobility restrictions, and then it's harder for them to go and to attend. And also, most of the activities require sobriety, which is not possible for the residents of the MAP. So most of the time, their participation is limited, and it's hard for them to go. So to conclude, we would like to emphasize that one of the major contributions of our study is to highlight the importance of culture in the implementation of MAPs in particular, but also in harm reduction interventions when working with Indigenous people. However, cultural adaptation is not inherently positive. Although the Montreal MAP has taken meaningful steps to adapt to the cultural needs of its residents, our study also observed some challenges such as cultural diversity, residents' mobility issues, and the environmental constraints of urban settings. Our study also shows how Indigenous residents assert their agency, because when they can't attend the cultural activities held by the organization, they do their own. We have some residents that they do a lot of artwork, as Rocio said. There's a lot of artwork on the walls, and they teach each other, so they do their own cultural adaptation. And MAP provides them with a culturally a place where they can do that cultural expression. And finally, the fact that the Montreal MAP is implemented by an Indigenous-led organization, and that the organization makes a lot of effort to adapt the MAP model. This is an attempt to materialize the perspective that is called Indigenous harm reduction. And this perspective recognizes that harm reduction cannot be applied universally, and it needs to integrate the knowledge, the values, and the ways of Indigenous people. And it also acknowledges the connection between colonization and substance use within Indigenous populations, and has culturally appropriate responses to this reality. So we would like to thank the participants of our study, the Indigenous-led organization, that is our research partner, the members of our laboratory who has contributed to the data collection, our funders, Fonds de Recherche du Québec, Société et Culture, and Canada Health, IUD, and RISC. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you all again. So now we're going to open it up to questions. We have a microphone and we'll be walking around with it. If you have questions, please raise your hand. On va aussi prendre des questions en français, si vous en avez, et après ça, moi, je vais juste les retraduire en anglais pour la salle. Donc, questions en français ou en anglais, feel free to raise your hands. Oh, I see one in the back.
Hi, thank you so much for those presentations. You might have already answered this. One thing I didn't quite catch is in both houses, especially the first. So how long can people stay, and then what's the transition? I guess and then where what's the plan for the next steps? And same with the map. I'm also assuming there's some kind of maximum time people can stay, and then how do you support people after, essentially? Does that make sense?
Did this work?
Yeah.
The two programs, the first one that I presented is transitional housing. So the goal is that they do move on elsewhere afterwards. Right now the program is set for 5 years. That date is mostly dictated by the fact that we don't own the building, and our lease at the building is 5 years. The eventual goal would be to maybe one day move that house, or either buy the house that we're in, or move it to a house that we own, in which case we can sort of be a bit more flexible in dictating how long the people can stay. The MAP program, however, is a permanent house. So people can stay as long as they wish, as long as they want, as long as they're still feeling that that's their space. So we don't put any time limits on how long they can stay there.
Oh, I see one in the front. Yes, they're coming to you. Oh, the microphone is coming to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So a lot of us are aware that there's been an uptick in the process of banishment in certain First Nations for people who have been involved in drug trafficking, and usually in drug trafficking. And I wanted to know if we're seeing reflections of these banishment policies in the city, if people who have been forced out of their communities are coming down here, and what kind of effect does that have, if any, on these sorts of programs?
I don't know if we've seen necessarily the impact of the banishment. I think that's something that we've always noticed. People saying that they can't go back to their community. Sometimes it's because of banishment. Sometimes it's because of legal conditions, that they can't be near certain people, or they have to access certain resources that they come to Montreal. So I think that's a trend that we've always seen since I've been at PAC. I haven't necessarily noticed an uptick in that. But at the same time, there is a growing homeless issue in Montreal. So that may be partially attributed to that as well. I don't know. I don't think I can give a better answer than that. I don't know if you, in terms of research, do you guys know of any research that has been done in that domain, or?
The banishment? No, we don't know. We really don't know.
I do know, in terms of our Safe Start program, and some of our working with our caseworkers and health coordinators who do a lot of work in trying to get people back to their home community when Montreal isn't meeting their needs or is no longer their place. And there is always a lot of barriers in that, just because in terms of the healthcare services that are available in the community, but also in terms of the relationships that these people have, and the supports and the housing. Of course, in Montreal is not good, but housing on communities is not much better either. So there's always those obstacles as well in terms of getting people back to their home community.
Hi, I have a question. More here.
Okay.
Yes, she gave me the mic already.
Perfect.
One step ahead of you.
Thank you.
My name is Jessica. I work here in Montreal in health and social services. Aside from your link with SHUM and addiction services, I'm just curious how it's going with the other health and social services. Do you have soutien à domicile? Do you have services that come to your houses? I'm curious what's going well and what's maybe room for improvement. Thanks.
Actually, Stéphanie Marsan is here. Maybe she can address this question because she knows better. Thanks for coming, Stéphanie.
I didn't know I was going to be put on the spot, but so in terms of other services, I can't speak for the teams that are actually on the ground at the center. I think there are a lot of partnerships that are being made. I think there are certain barriers still for access to care, especially with home care, trying to get more services when people are a little less mobile, are getting more sick. What we've noticed is that when people are doing well, they're a little more stable, they're willing to come to the hospital, to come on our unit. But as they get more and more sick, there's a much more of a méfiance, resistance to actually go to the hospital, thinking that that's where they're going to die, and that's the last thing they want to do. They want to. So that's an issue that we've had, is trying to.
Can you repeat what the comment was? Sorry, just so we can all hear it.
So the question was about home care, how home care has been able to support the community members, and that's where it's been really hard. Yes, we can talk about that later, but we are making progress on that. So
I can also just add, like, in terms of the other housing programs we have as well, some of the issues arise when, because PAC has shelters and we have housing, and oftentimes when we make a request for services from CLSC, there's not always an understanding of it's someone in a house. So often we do get some refusal saying, like, oh, that's the homeless sector, go speak to the équipe itinérance, and then we have to explain, like, no, we're actually a house, like the person lives here, they pay rent, home services can be delivered here. So on our end, there is some advocacy work and just a clarification of different services we offer. And like Stephanie mentioned before, like MAPS specifically, and a lot of our other services, our residents tend to be a bit younger, a bit more mobile, and we have Nevet services, we have navigators that manage to get them to these different services and clinics quite well. The MAP members do tend to be a bit older. And even in, like, inviting them into the home, like, we do try to do sort of an autonomy assessment, because it is autonomous living. They have to be able to cook for themselves and be able to manage certain things on their own. And it is something really, really hard to do an assessment for someone coming off the street. Because you ask them, look, have you ever cooked for yourself? And they say, oh yeah, for sure I can cook. And then later you find out that was like 30 years ago when they lived with their parents that they cooked. Or they said, if I had access to a kitchen, I could cook. But then in reality, that's not the quite. Or a lot of the reference people will say, like, oh, like, if the addictions, if the alcohol is managed, surely the person would be able to, like, we have confidence they'll manage their finances. And then once we get the person stable and the alcohol managed more clearly, we realize that, like, no, that didn't follow necessarily. So on our half as well, it's hard for us to sort of assess the needs of the people coming into the house before they get here. And then that often leads to us only making requests for services quite late in the steps. So that's something we have to work on as well. To making sure that the requests are made in a timely manner, because there is wait lists for these services, there are delays, so we understand that as well. But yeah.
Thank you for answering. I am just going to take opportunity, because I have the microphone. And my colleague I see at the other end of the room, we're agents pivots en itinérance, and so our role is to facilitate access to services for people experiencing homelessness within our sectors in Montreal. And we work with community organizations, we support community organizations as well as professionals in the réseau, in the system. And we support the people who support the people. So we don't work with the patients accessing services, we support you guys to help people accessing services. And I just think it's super important that the fact that someone, so yes, there is a nuance under they're like paying rent and they're in a MAP or they're in the shelter. However, the fact that someone doesn't have a fixed address is not allowed to ever be a criteria of refusal for any service in the réseau. Look up the Stratégie d'accès aux services from the Minister of Health from 2018. And if they're not sure how to adapt their services, you tell them to call their agent pivot, who's going to help them learn how to adapt their services to someone who's in homelessness. I mean, we're going to talk after, but I would love the room to hear that you're not allowed to say no services to someone because they don't have an address. That, like, is not supposed to be an exclusion criteria. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Thank you so much. I really just want to also say thank you for your presentations. And thank you so much for the work you've done for smaller organizations that working with a highly marginalized population. It's just absolutely incredible what you have pulled off in Montreal, where other much larger and more higher financed organizations have not been able to. So congratulations.
I'm looking around the room. I'm hoping I don't miss anyone with hands up.
I would love to also hear, like, it doesn't have to be a question. Like we mentioned before, these are, MAP's been up and running for like 6 years now. The new house has been up for a year and a half. So if other people here in the room have ideas or similar projects that they've done, love to hear about it now. I'm sure everyone else here would love to hear what you guys are up to. So don't be shy.
Oh, we have one up here. Oh, up here.
Sorry.
With the blue jersey in the middle. Yeah.
This is great work what you're doing with the alcohol programs and different programs that you do have. Have you ever thought of implementing like exercise programs into what you're doing? Because as I'm sure as everybody knows, myself, I don't have a quick six-pack before I go rollerblading. You know, you have to conserve your energy. You have to think for the future, think about your safety. You know, so I'm just quite curious to know, to help these participants, would you implement an exercise program for them to give them another opportunity to reestablish themselves into I guess a normalized life type of thing? So,
wonderful idea. Like I said, PAC has a whole bunch of different programs. So we do have it specific to the MAP. We do work with PAB, a préposé, and part of her role in the house is swine and care, but also on Sundays she does physical activities. Yeah, she does Tai Chi, she goes for walks. Like I said, the MAP residents tend to be a bit older, so we do adapt some of the activities that they do. And the main goal is just to make sure that they stay mobile, make sure that they keep moving. So she goes out for a walk, she does Tai Chi, she does yoga. There is some of that being done at the MAP program. In the other housing programs, we have a life skills coordinator that does, her mandate is really, really large. So she does adapt to the different sites she goes to. Sometimes she does focus on job skills, collective kitchen. We've talked with some of our partners with SPVM, for one, about having personal trainers come in and do workshops as well, just to keep physical activity and physical health part of we do have a global vision of what health is. We talk about mental health, addictions, but the physical aspect is something that living on the street or living in some of these programs can be neglected sometimes. So we do try to keep that, but it's a very minimum part, and we could be doing definitely more in that respects as well. I don't know if the MAP residents, have they said anything about wanting to do more or doing?
Just recently, yes, actually. Just recently, last week, I had a conversation with a resident who's been there for about a year now and, gaining a lot of stability. And he's been talking lately, he wants to work out. And he just told me, I've slept for the last year. I've spent the last year lying down, and now I want to regain myself. And so I think there are sometimes challenges when involving certain movements or certain, physical strenuous activities when you combine that with a certain level of intoxication. So I think that there is some sort of assistance that might be need to have, or, choosing the timing, making these things happen more in the morning, or just having some accompaniment. But I think that there is that interest, despite mobility issues, to find movement where we can. I mean, we've had other residents who were older, who Dr. Marsan prescribed them some exercises, and every day we'd see them do their up and down, legs up and down. And so, people, when they can and they have, the ability to do care about their health and do care about their well-being. And so I guess to bring more and more opportunities would be really beneficial for them.
Hi. My question is kind of about the research. Like, is part of your research, or is it in any way a goal to kind of, I guess, release what you've done as like an example for people? Is it something like, is there a kind of skeleton method that then could be adapted or other people could use or use as an example when we talk about cultural kind of security and adaptation of programs? Because, you know, I guess, can it be used for other cultures is the question. Like, are you kind of giving a guideline or a skeleton structure to then be like, okay, here's an example of how you can maybe use that in your org, in your project or whatever? Or is it just specific to like what you're doing and it stays where it is?
That's a great question, and I thank you because I've been thinking all day of how to try to add map as a pun into this presentation. But yeah, no, obviously, I mean, research is reciprocal, so we want this to be able to be used to benefit everybody. I think, you know, having, let's say, cultural adaptation in an urban environment, like you said, with diversity, is going to be very different opposed to if you built a map in a Inuit community specifically, because then you're tailoring to a specific community. So I think that there will be differences. I mean, we'll be able to talk about what it's like in an urban environment, and then people could maybe use this as an example for culturally adapting a program in an urban environment. Then again, will it relate the same? Will it be all the same elements? Not necessarily, because it's very situational. But absolutely, we're hoping to release this. I don't know exactly when the date is for our publication, but this is one of 3 large projects that are looking towards the feasibility of building more maps in Quebec. So we have this one, which is looking towards the cultural adaptation. We're doing an empowerment evaluation as well with the residents so that they can evaluate for themselves how the map is working for them. And then we're going to be looking into feasibility studies in 2 other areas in Quebec to be announced. But thank you for that question.
If you do want to stay up to date, like Esme and the team mentioned, they're 8 months in. So if you do want to stay up to date with where we go from there, where they go with there, and the publications and stuff like that, feel free to leave your card or your contact information, and I'm sure they'll be happy to share all the new developments.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's a question up here. Who has the microphone? Do you have the microphone? In the red hoodie, burgundy hoodie. Yeah.
I do my steps. Hello. So I work in Kahnawake, and I'm an addictions counselor, and I've noticed this question is in reference to housing. So more and more of my clients, you know, find themselves, you know, without housing, and like I said, they've lost like connections or burnt bridges, let's say, with family. And so I'm just wondering, like, for the sober living, I'm just wondering, could we help them apply to get in, or is it strictly basically for the urban community? Like, let's say, you know, it's transitioning from the shelter into the sober living unit. That's my question. Like, because I understand, is it solely reserved first for the, you know what I mean? Like people transitioning to, or would I be able to communicate with someone and let's say fill out an application right away? It's a good question, sorry.
No. In terms of references, we accept references from anyone and everywhere. Because this is actually one of the first housing programs that we do have limitations in terms of financing from the OMHM. So in the house, there's 14 spaces. 10 of those spaces are financed through OMHM, so those people do have to be coming from the Montreal area. They have to live in Montreal for the last 12 months. They have to have done their taxes and all those paperwork. We do have 4 spaces that we are a bit more free to decide on how we use those spaces. So it could become people coming from outside the community as well, outside the urban community. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, another one in the front row. On Inisi.
Hello. So I just have a question about the new sober living house. Let's say that somebody like does their medical detox and then gets into therapy and then transitions into the home. What happens if like they regress or they slip or they have like a difficult time? Like, are they able to come back to the house? When does it start getting like maybe precarious where you don't know if they can stay there any longer? And do they have access to like counseling or support in like that first beginning part of time when they're staying there?
Yeah, great question. Yes, yes, and yes. In the sense that, like Chris had mentioned, he animates the A group in the evenings once a week. We have a CA group that comes by. We have Red Road Recovery. We have a caseworker on site that gives sort of individual care. Right now I have a social worker stagiaire that also gives care as well, just to help those one-on-one plans. In terms of relapse and rechute, that's part of the program, that's part of the sobriety journey. It's extremely rare that people get it right on the first shot. So it's sort of been worked in the program that we take those cases individually. We look at sort of the protector factors. Is the rechute something that, the person relapsed and came to talk to us about it, came to talk to, how do we get back on the right path? I need extra supports, what can I do? Or is it something that, relapsed and it's hidden away and also in terms of how it's impacting the other residents in the house. So is the relapse happening actively next door to all the other sober people? Is that putting them at risk? Or is it a relapse happening outside? You're going to the PAC 2 or when they connect with the rest of the community. So all those sort of things are just sort of discussed with the person. And we sort of create, it's very individual. We do try to make those decisions collectively as well, as much as possible. But yeah, so if you relapse, it's not a necessarily expulsion from the program. There will be a limit eventually. If it's happening every 2 days, if it's something that's putting the sobriety of the other residents at risk, that's something we may have to put a stop to. And that doesn't mean that you can't reapply afterwards. We have had residents who have left the program, and that was sort of like the bottom of the barrel for them when they say I've done it again, I put my housing at risk because of my drinking. And afterwards they've gone back into treatment, and we're hoping to accept them back in the house once that's done. So yeah, there's no, in all of PAC services, there's never ever a hard stop. We're saying we'll never accept you again, but as long as the person's willing to show to us and work with the community and make steps towards the sobriety, then they can always be welcome.
Well, I have a question about the houses when they're full, especially the sober one. When it's full and you guys are not taking any more applications, where do you send them?
Yeah, so we do take a wait list. And then when places open up, we'll call the first person on the list, we'll interview them and try to get them in the house. But in the meantime, like you said, where do we send them? It's working with our partner organizations. So not a lot of, we do have other housing programs. Like I said, we have another transitional housing program that's studios. That is not necessarily designed to be specifically sober. But if there's opening in that space and it is a good fit for that person, that's a possibility as well. That program also has a wait list, which can be complicated to manage as well. So it's looking at, internally inside a PAC, do we have other housing options that would respond to the person's need? If we don't, or if it's all full, then we do look at our partners to say, where else can we go? No quick and easy answer there, unfortunately.
Hesitating asking a last question when it's almost lunchtime, but well, it's I was thinking about this, but I'm not quite sure how to ask my question. But basically, so let's say it's full, hypothetically, you send to partners. How do you, I guess, what's the protocol or ensuring cultural relevancy or ensuring a cultural relevancy with other partner organizations and yeah, does that make sense? Let's say if people have to leave PAC or for whatever reason can't be there or in other neighborhoods, it's a kind of big question. I don't know if that makes, you can answer it a little.
Do you want to go?
I guess. This might not be so much from the research, but more of my experience in the field. But I mean, there's, how would I say, it's a big network. You know, the different organizations that are serving unhoused people in Montreal, it's a big network. There's a lot of partnerships, whether it be between the organizations themselves or the people that use them. You know, it's not uncommon that people will know other people that are staying at, for example, so-and-so organization, I don't want to name it, so-and-so organization, and then some people will go there, and then there'll be maybe times of a little migration or jumping around here and there between different services, sometimes until we find a good fit. Sometimes it's because a person wants to take a break from a certain place and then go back. Sometimes they'll have a specific friend, or it's closer to a different kind of service that they need. What I've seen is that in Montreal, many organizations, even if they're not Indigenous-led, are building Indigenous programs or making sure that their employees, at least, or intervention workers, are trained in Indigenous realities and well-versed, so that they can help with referencing to the right places. I don't know if that answers your big question. Yeah? Okay.
And just to build off that, again, like I won't keep you long. So PAC, as mentioned, we do know a lot of our partners. We work with them quite often. You get a feel for what they can adapt to and what services are available. It's also working with the person in front of you, asking them, where do you feel safe? Where do you want to go? These are not decisions we make on our own. And also in terms of PAC and our partners, as May mentioned, we do have partners that do a lot of work with Indigenous communities that aren't necessarily Indigenous-led or Indigenous focused. We do also look at exchanges of services. So like we mentioned, the slideshow PAC does do our best to train all of our staff and the people we work with on a minimum level of Indigenous realities. And that is something that we can also offer to our partner organizations when we do see that there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of back and forth, and it would be beneficial to all the people involved. So that's something we've done in the past as well that sort of helped.
Okay. The volunteer said no mas. That means it's lunchtime, everyone. Wishing you bon appétit. Thank you again to the presenters and the audience for your questions.